Hello, it's Paul Driscoll here, aka the Drisk. Now, in honour of the little old yellow pill muncher turning 35 recently, we at Retro Asylum thought it would be fun to look at him and his family's illustrious career. Of course, such a long popular career has meant a lot of games that Pac has appeared in, so I'll only concentrate on his main arcade related games and the bigger home console games. So sit back and get ready to go pill munching as we go to Pac-Man fever. Now, the story starts, of course, with Toru Iwatani, who started working for Namco in 1977. And in 1979 was tasked with coming up with a new game idea that would appeal to women. When considering what women like to do, Toru thought of eating. Women like to eat sweets and desserts, so surely they would like that in a game. Now he had the idea of eating, Toru needed to come up with a game character to do all that eating. Well, if urban myths are true, then he got the idea whilst eating pizza and saw the profile of a pizza with a missing slice, and he knew he had his game character. Of course, he's also said in other interviews that it was inspired by the Japanese symbol for mouth, which is called the kuchi. Well, whatever the case, his game design was well on its way. The trouble was, in development of the game, it was still missing something. Toru had the game character now, which he'd called Pacman. Now, Paku is the Japanese word, kind of like the sound of eating, so it's like saying chomp in English. He also had ghosts, all different colours and personalities, to chase the Paku ghost. And he'd laid out cookies, or they became known as pellets, for Paku to eat. But it needed something else. Now, Toru was a fan of the Popeye cartoons and comic strips, and thought that dynamic where Popeye would switch from being the weak and beaten up from Bluto to eating spinach and having Bluto in fear of him was a great game mechanic. So Toru inserted the idea into his game, creating what he would call big cookies, or later they became known as power pills, that would turn Paku from being the hunted to the hunter from the ghosts. On initial release, the game was called Pac Man because Paku looked a bit like a hockey puck. But initial trade show experts didn't think much of the game, with many completely overlooking it for other games released that year, such as Defender and the game Rally X. But when it got released in Japan, the public thought different and went Pac-Man crazy. Quickly, in October that year, Midway, whom had made a fortune licensing Space Invaders from Taito, would do it again and secure the rights for the West for Pac-Man. Of course, on getting the license, Midway quickly realised that having the name Pac Man was a bad name to have, with gamers of course being able to change the title to something else far ruder with only one stroke of a pen. So Midway renamed the game to Pac Man in honour of the character's name, Paku. Suddenly they had a massive hit upon their hands, with the craze of gaming again not seen since the days of Space Invaders and Pong. Pac-Man has gone on to make $1 billion in 10 years revenue for his first arcade game alone, and that's just arcade gameplays, not to mention all the countless home ports and that Pac has appeared with. And unlike all those prior games like Pong and Space Invaders, Pac-Man had something those games didn't: a game character, and that meant game licensing. Suddenly Pac-Man was on everything from lunchboxes, cereal, his own TV shows, and even selling products in adverts. Of course, such a craze would produce sequels, and here Pac-Man was not short of sequels over his long career. The first sequel that we'll discuss is Miss Pac-Man, released in 1981. Now, this game started out life as a hack by American company General Computer Corporation, whom were making a living producing conversion kits for arcade owners to breathe new lives into existing games. Unfortunately, the missile conversion kit they had done with Missile Command, called Super Missile Attack, had landed them into legal hot water with Atari, and they'd been legally told they were not allowed to release any more conversion kits until that legal situation was resolved. Now, rather than lose out on their conversion work for Pac-Man that they'd done called Crazy Otto, they decided to go to Midway themselves and offer a deal to legally license the game. Midway was impressed with the game hack, with adding a different maze and moving fruit. Plus, Midway was getting frustrated with Namco, who were taking an age to produce an official sequel. So they agreed to the game and had Crazy Otto's graphics changed to a girl Pac-Man. They originally were going to call the game Pac-Woman, but then they decided that Miss Pac-Man sounded better rolling off the tongue. But there was a scene in the game that showed Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man with a baby. Now, Midway thought it would cause a lot of concern with some people, seeing the characters having a baby out of wedlock. So they then decided Mrs. Pac-Man, and finally settling on Ms. Pac-Man, which sounded better. And a really good game it was too, with many considering it one of the best in the Pac Man series. Now, Namco finally came out with their official sequel in 1982, and it was called Super Pac-Man. Toro has gone on record saying that he has poor memories of making the game, and he personally finds it boring, and it was a wrong decision making Pac-Man becoming as big as he comes. Now, I actually personally like this version of the game. The idea is to collect all the fruit by opening up doors with keys. Not only do you have power pellets like before, but you also have the super pills that turn Pac absolutely huge and able to chomp their way through closed doors. Maybe it messes with the original idea a little too much, but at least it's suitably different and I think a lot of fun. Next we have Pac-Man Plus, released in 1982. This isn't really the original Pac-Man, with a few subtle differences to make it more US and West friendly. The maze colours have been changed and the things to collect have been made more US centric, such as it's no longer fruit but cans of cola, for example. Also in 1982, Midway, flush with their success of licensing Miss Pac-Man and making a fortune out of it, would try and do it again with their Baby Pac-Man, released in 1983. Now, Baby Pac-Man was interesting in that it was a pinball and arcade hybrid. Now, I've never played this game before, but on the video that I'm showing here of John's arcade game review and tech, it has a wonderful video of the game in action. The following year, Midway would do another Pac game without Namco's consent, and this time it being a poor quiz game, calling it Professor Pac-Man. Again, really the game was not much cop. Midway really cashing in on the Pac-Man craze. When Namco finally did a sequel that was official, it was called Pac and Pal, released in 1983. This took many of the elements of Super Pang, such as the keys and doors, and added in a second player this time, who could join in the fun, called Miru. Sadly, it wasn't simultaneous two-player, and the character Miru looked identical to Pac. This game didn't do very well, never leaving Japan, and it's easily the rarest Pac-Man game around. Now, it's a real shame because I think the game's sequel is great, with the idea of flipping playing cards for fruit and getting the keys. Not to mention you have the naughty baby Pac-Man running off with items that Pac has worked so hard to get. I do wonder if this is an allegory from Namco about the naughtiness of Midway releasing Baby Pac-Man, but we will never know. The next game in the Pac Man series was Junior Pac-Man. Now, this was again another Midway unofficially endorsed sequel. This, however, does some other cool things to the series. It doubles the size of the maze this time, with the game being the first in the series where the game has to scroll around, with you having to keep up with the action. Also, you have the cute propeller beanie hat that Pac Jr. wears. There's a lot of cuteness and fun to the game. But again, this wasn't a great success, with at this point mania for Pac was beginning to wane with oversaturation and frankly, other games coming along. At this point also, Namco actually ended its agreement with Midway, mainly due to all these non-official endorsed games that Midway were releasing. Now, during this time of the Pac-Man craze, from 1982, Hanna-Barbera had produced a Pac-Man cartoon called Pac Man the Animated Series. The show would only last a year, with Pac fever as beginning to go on the decline. But in 1984, inspired by that series, Namco would take their next Pac-Man game in a completely new direction. Called Pac Land, the game was a revelation, being a scrolling platformer this time. Now, the idea of a scrolling platformer was almost unique in 1984, with only Jump Bug really pipping it to the post. And it's definitely one of the first examples I can think of where you actually had parallax scrolling, where nearer items moved quicker than faraway objects. Now, this is a great game, with Pac now with his whole family, and all in the beautiful stylized look of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and as you play Pac as he goes through Ghost Town to reach Fairyland and back. This personally is one of my favourite games in the series. Pac fans though would have to wait a good number of years for their next Pac fix. Thankfully, Pac-Mania, released in 1987, was a peach of a game. This time things was an isometric 3D maze, and Pac had learned to jump in the mazes this time. The maps now were also huge, and being 4 completely different looks to each maze for you to enjoy. When you combine this with the music, it makes the game into a popular sequel, and consequently it saw numerous home ports on practically every system of the day. But Pac in the arcades would take a long hiatus now. Pac was relegated at this point to home consoles, with the brilliant Pac Attack released in 1993, a kind of Puyo Puyo style puzzle game that's great fun to play, and the much weirder Pac Man 2, The New Adventures on the SNES and Mega Drive. This was known as Hello Pac-Man in Japan, and it's a weird point-and-click adventure. Much better, but still average, was Pac in Time, a side-scrolling platformer released in 1994. For arcade Pac lovers, they would have to wait until 1996 with Pac-Man Arrangement. This was a fun isometric Pac-Man with boss battles and numerous different mazes to enjoy. The game originally came out in the arcades, but was mostly for the Namco Classic Collection Volume 2. More interesting thing perhaps that though was the Pac-Man VR game for virtual reality machines back in the day. This actually lets you experience Pac in complete 3D and from his viewpoint. The game really does look intriguing, and I would love to give this game a go. Pac left the arcades again at this point and did masses and masses of games on the home consoles. Far too many to talk about here. But there were things like the Pac Man World Series, which began in 1999, which had a lot of popularity. There was also Pac-Man Versus in 2003 on the GameCube, which brought a multiplayer element to Pac-Man. You also had dodgy spin-offs such as Pac-Man Rally, to name but a few. Pac-Man at this point was certainly being put through the hard knocks, as Namco continually tried to squeeze dry as much from the game character as they could. Thankfully though, in 2007, the original creator would design one more Pac-Man game before his retirement, and that game was a peach, being Pac-Man Championship Edition. Now, for those who haven't played this gem of a game, please do. It is amazing, being one of the best games in the series. This time it's all about quick bursts of frantic play and working for high scores, and it certainly gets the adrenaline pumping. They would do a sequel as well called Pac-Man Championship Edition DX, released in 2010, that improved things like the online leaderboard. And finally they did do a DX Plus version which came out in 2013 as well. But finally, the last true Pac-Man game that was released was in 2011, and it would be a return to form for Pac-Man, being Pac-Man Battle Royale. This took the elements of Pac-Man Versus, being also 4-player, and combined it with ideas from Championship Edition games and ran with it. This time the idea is to collect points and grab power pellets, supersizing you and allowing you to eat the other players. It's a highly addictive and competitive game, being a lot of fun to play. Sadly, the only place to play Battle Royale at home is on the overpriced Pac-Man Museum compilation. Now, I bought this for PC on the Steam sale just the other day, and I have to admit I am fuming at the lack of care that's gone into this compilation. Not only does the game only allow Xbox control pads to be used, no other control pad works, so I'm having to use keyboard controls, but nearly all the games have been horribly cropped, so the majority of the game is just a plain background. Sadly though, one comes to expect this from Namco, whose compilations seem to have no honour or love in representing their wonderful back catalogues. Anyway, enough of my griping. So, Pac-Man, happy 35th birthday from all of us here at Retro Asylum family. May you see many happy more years, and that Namco releases a decent compilation to truly honour you. A VR Namco arcade with Oculus Rift and Morpheus having all your games in one package is certainly one that I would love to buy. So anyway, until next time, see you later.